Ivy today. We've come to the woods and we're just going to do a bit of a general training session, but in a different environment, just to help proof some of our behaviours. So let's give it a go and see how we get on. Ready?
So with all of my training sessions, I like to start out doing things that I know the dog can get success with. And I think it's particularly important in environments like this, which are so much more distracting, to make sure that you can do things that you're confident your dog should be able to get success with, because that helps you get a bit of a barometer in terms of their focus and engagement with you in that environment. So we started out our session just doing some whistle cue exercises, very basic stuff, but looking at our stop whistle first. We got success with them, so then I did a very simple recall from a sit stay. Again, we got success with that. So it's just about making sure that she's switched on and engaged with me in this environment before I start thinking about making things more complex. And then we finished our little warm-up with a turn whistle game. So all of these exercises are things that I have done videos on in the past, if you want to have a look at any of them in more detail. Now, because I was happy with the level of engagement I was getting from her in that little warm-up session, we then moved to a slightly different location in the woods and did a bit of hunting. So I appreciate you can't really see what she's doing here, but when I set her off, I normally expect her to have a bit of a blast and go a bit further than normal, which she does, which requires the turn whistle to get her back to me. And then she starts to settle into things. So I think it's important to note here that Ivy is a beating dog. We're not doing trials, we're not doing tests. So the standard that I'm expecting is going to be very different to people that are looking to do those sorts of things. What I'm looking for with Ivy is that she covers the ground reasonably well, that she stays within a reasonable beat, and that she stays engaged and responsive to me when I'm asking for it. So I think here she's doing pretty well. She responds beautifully to that stop whistle, so gets rewarded. And then we moved the camera a bit further out and continued hunting. Now, I think woods like these are brilliant training grounds for our working gun dogs, because they have all the kind of terrain and everything that you'd expect of the environment that the dogs are going to be working in. But this is a public access wood, it has a car park, and it has a heavy footfall through it, which means that there is very little live game around for her to stumble across when we're doing these exercises. So it's a really safe place to start proofing your behaviours in more distracting and more interesting environments. Now, in total, we probably did about 10 minutes of hunting in this session. I obviously won't show you it all because it's not particularly exciting to watch. But within there, I occasionally dropped out a dummy for her to find while she was hunting and then bring back. I threw in a stop whistle now and again. I used my turn whistle when she was starting to stretch too far out of the area I wanted her to be, and then threw in recalls at the end. And all of that was really successful, so I was really happy with her hunting. We then moved on to see if I could look at her transition from hunting to retrieving, and this is something that quite a lot of hunting dogs can struggle with. So it was just a simple marked retrieve, but in this environment the mark is obviously much more challenging given the terrain. But I was really pleased. So she transitioned from kind of doing the zigzag nose down hunting behaviour to straight line run out and pick up retrieve behaviour really nicely. So we did 2 of them. And with each one, I just changed the picture slightly, so she was retrieving from a different area in a different direction, just again to help with generalising her behaviours. Now, when I throw this dummy out, you can see that she transitions from the sit to the stand. And for me, I think that is pure anticipation of being sent for the retrieve. However, I want to make sure that she is remaining steady, so I just re-cue her to sit and then pause slightly before giving her the cue to retrieve to make sure that she is going when I send her and not when she chooses to. She finds the item and brings it back beautifully, so 2 nice marked retrieves there. And then I decide to call the exciting stuff a day, and we move on to a slightly more mundane but very important steadiness exercise to finish up. So what I'm doing here is I'm throwing out a few items as kind of distractions to make it a little bit harder, and then Ivy and I are just standing together doing nothing. And this is so important to integrate into all of your training sessions, time to teach your dog that it's not always about them and it's not always fun and games. If you want to take your dog to a group training class, then often they're going to have to wait their turn. If you want to take your dog on a shoot, then you're going to spend a lot of time hanging around doing nothing, and your dog needs to be able to cope with that. So I think it is really important to integrate this sort of thing into your training, and it's also a great way to help your dog's arousal levels start to come back down. So if you've been doing some really exciting stuff, sometimes just sitting doing nothing will help them to start to settle themselves back. So normally I would do this sort of exercise for a bit longer, but we had another dog coming towards us, so I decided to pick my items up and end the exercise there. And then that was the end of the session. So hopefully that gives a bit of insight into a more general outing that I have with Ivy. And as always, if you have any tips, questions or advice, please feel free to pop them in the comments below.